across Scotland and Northern Ireland, and that's where it's going to turn quite clear and chilly as we go into the overnight period. Elsewhere, though, we keep a lot of cloud, we keep this rain, and further wet weather pushes back into Wales through the small hours of Sunday, so here turning into quite a wet night. Temperatures 18 or so in the south, very warm indeed. Further north, as I say, getting down into single figures in some of our more rural spots. So a bit of a north-south split through Sunday morning, lots of bright and fine weather across the northern half of the country, but further south we've got the cloud and we've got these outbreaks of rain. Some of the rain welcome though across the southeast, where it's been a very dry July so far, and I think as we go through the rest of the day we'll continue to see some bits and pieces of rain through much of the afternoon. Despite that though, still very warm and humid, temperatures in the mid-20s quite widely, a little bit of a fresher feel further north, but still pleasant in that sunshine. Now, drier for most of us by Monday, the risk of some further wet weather on Tuesday, and all the while our temperatures staying on the warm side. Goodbye.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, good morning. You're watching and listening to Saturday Morning on GB News with me, Esther McVeigh, and Philip Davis.
Yes, indeed. We have a fantastic show lined up for you today. We'll be looking at the major changes in the law, which now allows broadcasters to film judges sentencing serious criminals in the Crown Courts.
And as Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss continue their campaigns in the race for number 10, we'll be speaking to one of the stars of the earlier round of the contest. That's Kemi Badenoch, later in the hour. We'll all have lots of that, lots more on the show. But first, here's your news headlines.
Good morning. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Rail services are being severely disrupted across the country following the latest round of industrial action. Thousands of drivers from 7 train companies have walked off the job as part of a series of strikes over pay and conditions. It's affecting football fans travelling to opening games of English League, as well as people trying to get to the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. More strikes will be staged next month, which travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder, says will be even worse.
in 2 weeks' time, a much bigger strike, because that will bring in Avanti West Coast, which runs from London to the West Midlands, Northwest England, and into Scotland, and also Cross Country, which does lots of stuff, particularly centred on Birmingham. If, for example, you wanted to travel on the Great Western region, and that's a really significant one, as you can imagine this time of year, there are no trains serving Devon and Cornwall.
The RMT Union's former Assistant General Secretary Steve Headley told GB News there are a number of steps the government must take to resolve the dispute.
People will just not sit there and let their homes become cold because they can't heat them, because they've got no gas, because we've got profiteering companies. And the answer is quite simple. The government have to legislate, the government have to nationalise these companies, like France has just done with EDF, and have got to make sure that this inflation crisis is brought under control.
In a huge blow to Rishi Sunak, former Tory leadership contender Tom Tugendhat has endorsed Liz Truss in the race to become Prime Minister. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee says her promises of tax cuts are based on true Conservative principles and that only she can unite the party. He says both contenders have huge qualities and many talents, but Ms Truss has the advantage on the world stage because of her cabinet position. But Conservative MP Andrew Bowie told GB News Rishi Sunak would be a better leader given the cost of living crisis.
When Chancellor created the furlough scheme that saved 11 million jobs in a matter of days, saved thousands of businesses from going bust with the bounce back scheme and other support measures to support them, introduced e-tax help out that saved so many of our hospitality industries from going bust over the summer of 2020. So I think when you look at it in the round, Rishi has demonstrated by his actions as Chancellor that he's very, very willing and able to deliver short-term measures to support people who are struggling.
The lawyer for victims and families impacted by the infected blood scandal says they must be compensated immediately. It's after the inquiry chairman said more than 2,000 surviving victims should receive £100,000 each without delay. About 2,400 people died in what's been labelled the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS after patients were infected with HIV and hepatitis C by contaminated blood products in the 1970s and 80s. In a major shake-up of the youth prison system, the government is building the UK's first secure school, which will see criminals aged 12 to 18 live in boarding school style. Built in Kent, the Medway Secure School will house some of the most dangerous young offenders in the country, including those who have committed murder. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab has outlined why secure schools is a radical change of approach in dealing with young offenders.
That is the difference, and that is the ethos change and the regime change that you'll see in a place like this. And what it means for those hard-to-reach young people who've committed some serious crimes is they get a chance to go through a school curriculum. Many of them will have been truants or expelled, and actually sit down and learn and get those skills. They'll get training. There's going to be small-scale farming done on the site, so they can get some vocational training as well. And we know in the evidence from the US, from Spain, from Scandinavian jurisdictions, is that with this particularly tough to reach young group, it is the key to giving them an opportunity to turn their life around and fundamentally reducing the very high levels of reoffending from young offender institutes, and that will keep our streets safer.
And chief Russian gas producer Gazprom has said this morning they've begun the process of halting supplies to Latvia for apparent breaches in the agreement between countries for gas withdrawal. In a statement this morning, Gazprom did not specify which conditions Latvia broke. This comes as Russia also halted sales of gas to Germany earlier this week. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip.
Now, we always want to hear your views on our show, so please send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews.
Well, we start our programme, as we always do, looking at the past week's events. And here to do that with us is author and former Labour MP Simon Dunchak. So, what has been happening in the papers this week? What's caught your eye?
The big story for me, and I think it's bigger than people realise, really, is the sacking of Labour MP Sam Tarrant. So Keir Starmer has sacked him from the shadow front bench. He was a spokesman on transport, and the reason he was sacked is because he spoke out of turn in terms of inflation pay rises. But the reality is it's because he's been going on striking picket lines. And for background, not many people know who this guy is. He's extremely close to Angela Rayner. I think that's fair to say.
We all thought they were having a relationship. Is that what you mean?
It could well be. It could well be. But the reason this is important, I think it's actually really an opportunity for Keir Starmer. Sam Tarrant is clearly on the far left. He's been on a picket line with Jeremy Corbyn in the last day or two. We're coming up to Labour Party annual conference. And I think what Starmer should do, if he's serious about getting in government, is having a clear out. So getting rid of Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn completely, expelling him from the party, doing more of what he's done in terms of Sam Tarrant, and having a real clear out, and perhaps making a Kinnock-type speech at annual conference saying he's taking on the left and once and for all getting rid of them. And that would be really electorally successful.
Now, I mean, is this going to cause a huge row in the Labour Party? Because, you know, the Labour Party and its ties with the unions are obviously historic and
financial.
Well, and financial as well. But people might say, well, look, you know, that's what the Labour Party was sort of born out of, the trade unions, that if the trade unions are out on strike, the Labour Party should be there with them. I noticed a tweet from John Prescott a couple of days ago, which had a picture of him addressing the miners in 1984. In Sheffield, saying, I did this while I was Shadow Transport Secretary, sort of sticking the boot into Keir Starmer. So has this got the potential for a massive row within the Labour Party?
I think it's a row that Starmer should welcome, and we all remember what happened in 87 after 84, and Labour went on to lose dramatically, so taking lessons from John is not a good idea. Starmer needs an argument like this, I think. It's like the one member, one vote argument at Labour Party conference. I think that was in 92 or something, where Blair took on the left and sorted them out. And so this is a real opportunity for Starmer. And if he doesn't take it, then I think he's reducing his chances of winning the next general election.
I'm just going to throw in a thought here. People have been talking about blue on blue with our leadership campaign there, and this is a bit of red on the sort of your extremes of the party. Do you need to do this? Or can you say, look, we're a broad church, some people here will be supporting the union, some people won't? I mean, could he not embrace it that way? Or is it just too difficult to do that, and that will ultimately cause a fragmentation? Does he need to choose this argument and assert his authority?
I think he really does. I think he needs to expel some people from the left. I did it when I was a parliamentary candidate in 2007. We expelled people in Rochdale who were on the extreme left from the party, and we went on to win in 2010. And that's just a local example, but more of that type of action, I think, puts Starmer in a really good place.
Interesting. I don't know what Angela Rayner will make of that.
Well, exactly. That's why
as deputy leader of the Labour Party.
She'll be sticking up for him.
Now, I'd be interested to know what you think about this, Simon. Earlier this week, and it was covered extensively on GBNews, we had the changing rules on IVF treatment. So there was a lesbian couple, Megan and Whitney, who were interviewed on the channel, who successfully challenged the ban on IVF for single-sex couples. But also the changes were bigger than that. And of course, you know, as far as I can see, if heterosexual couples can get IVF treatment on the NHS, I don't really see any reason why same-sex couples can't, and they successfully won that case. There was also the removal of the ban for IVF where one or both have had a child from a previous relationship. That ban's now been overturned, so they can now get IVF treatment. Now, the thing that I thought wasn't really covered in this debate, and the bigger question is, can the NHS actually afford giving anybody free IVF treatment? You know, we've got massive chronic waiting lists in the NHS. It's nearly impossible to get to see a GP at the moment. And yet, despite all those sort of pressures and financial pressures on the NHS, we're now extending who can have IVF treatment free of charge on the NHS, which costs a huge amount of money. And I just wondered, and I'd be interested to know what our viewers think about this, I'd be interested to know what you think about this, is it time that in the NHS we said, look, we literally can't do everything. We can't do it. We're going to have to prioritise certain things, and certain things are going to have to be out of the scope of the NHS. And do you think that we're going to have to get to that point? And if so, do you think IVF treatment is one of those things that perhaps should have to fall by the wayside on the NHS?
Well, I think that's a really interesting point. I think you must have at least limitations on IVF if the cost is that much. But reform of the NHS, radical reform, I think is the elephant in the room. I think it is not fit for purpose. The pandemic has shown that, and the aftermath of the pandemic has shown that. Waiting list too long. Lots of people going private because they just can't get treatment on the NHS. And it can't be, we can't tinker with it as we have for many years. We need radical reform. Whether a Conservative government, for electoral reasons, can do that, or whether it needs a Labour government who is bold enough to radically reform it, perhaps give us an Australian-style model of healthcare. There are other models out there in the world, but I think we have to radically reform this black hole that takes so many billions of pounds in taxpayers' money and doesn't really deliver for us. That's reality.
Because, of course, the big question here is about whether or not people have a right to have children, isn't it, really?
Yes.
And, you know, I'm not sure that people do have a right to have children, personally. But it's a big question, isn't it?
It's a big question, and I think what you said is that waiting lists for life-threatening either illnesses, diseases, well, there could be up to 6 million, so should they be prioritised? I get that. And then, going back to Simon's point, I mean, we have a health service that was set up to employ 140,000 people. It's now employing 1.4 million people. Is it too big? Is there too many pen pushers? Is there too many sort of management there? And the GP situation, I mean, you'll know our mailbags full of people saying, I can't get to see a GP, and now we know a fifth of GPs are only working 26 hours a week. So there are brilliant ones doing lots of hours, but there are some there and you can't get to see them because they're only doing 26 hours a week, and by anybody's standards, that's not a full-time role, is it, 26 hours?
Now, what story caught you?
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't in the newspapers. It was something that I watched on Twitter yesterday. It was I won't say it was an interview at all. It was Chris Pincher, that was the MP who did have to resign. He resigned as Deputy Chief Whip for, allegations of groping people. It's now been referred to the Independent Complaints and Grievances Scheme to see if that did happen. So it's going through a process at the moment. Anyway, so he stood minding his own business at a railway station, and a Sky reporter went over to him and literally kept him on air for over 4 minutes, sort of barracking him, saying, don't you feel sorry? Don't you want to say something about this? You've brought Boris down. Now, I'd call that, it was like vigilantism, journalism. It was basically harassing and bullying. Now, I'm not saying what Chris Pincher, did he do it, didn't he do it? There's a process to find out that. Do I think you can't doorstep people? No, I've been doorstepped enough, and you can ask a question, but 4 minutes keeping somebody on camera, on air, I personally felt it very, very uncomfortable, and I don't think that was good journalism. He didn't have any extra facts. It was just barracking him. So, again, I don't know, maybe viewers think that's right, politicians deserve all they get, but I thought that was harsh.
What do you think, Simon?
Well, you have to think about the alleged victims of Chris Pincher, obviously, but you also have to think about Chris Pincher, and I just suspect that he's a very vulnerable man at this moment in time, and being barracked and harassed like that by a journalist for that length of time, I think is highly inappropriate.
The thing, I've been doorstepped by Michael Crick. I always said that I could, my political career had reached a peak when I was chased down the street by Michael Crick.
It was always my fear.
Well, I had it during the general election campaign. But the thing is, Michael Crick always did it with great humour. It was entertaining. It was entertaining, and
there was information there. He had his facts.
Yeah, exactly.
He knew what he's doing.
Absolutely.
He made it into a crafted piece of journalism.
Michael Crick is a brilliant journalist, but this was very different, as you say.
Simon Danchuk, see you at 11 o'clock with your views on today's newspaper stories.
Now, major changes in the law will allow broadcasters to film judges sentencing serious criminals in the Crown Courts.
Judge Sarah Munro made legal history on Thursday as she handed 25-year-old Ben Oliver a life sentence live on TV with a minimum term of 10 years and 8 months for manslaughter. Well, I'm pleased to say we're now joined by criminal and defence fraud barrister Daniel Janet QC. Good morning, Daniel. So, a big change there for what happens in, Crown Courts, criminal courts. Why has it come about?
Well, things move very slowly in the law, Esther. I mean, it's come about because the public recognised, and the government has rightly recognised, the need for open justice and for the public to understand how our process works, for a greater understanding. And we saw that with Judge Munro, who very clearly explained in a difficult case, a complex case, why she was imposing a life sentence, why this man will not be considered for parole until he has served 10 years and 8 months. And she set out very clearly, so the public could see for the first time, the aggravating circumstances and the mitigating circumstances in sentencing. As I say, the surprise is it's taken so long. I mean, I very much hope this is a first step towards televising the entire criminal process so the public get an even greater understanding.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key thing, isn't it, Daniel? Why is it? I mean, people will be puzzled as to why we can see the sentencing, but we've heard nothing about the case, or we haven't seen the evidence or whatever. We've just seen the sentencing. It seems a rather bizarre situation that we get such an incomplete picture.
Well, that is exactly my view, and I have no doubt that the change will come. I mean, if you remember, Parliament wasn't even televised. What was it? You'll be able to tell me. I think it's 1998 or 1988. Certainly in our lifetime, it's only happened. But I believe in our lifetime, we will see this gradual change towards televising the entirety of the process, because it is strange. And if you remember, in America, we see it. We saw it with the O.J. Simpson case. We saw it with the Oscar Pistorius case in South Africa. So other countries manage it and deal with the objections that are raised.
Now, I think the point against the House of Commons at the time and not wanting to televise it is said because you're trivialising what goes on in the House of Commons. Is there an element of this here happening in the court? You're trivialising what's going on. You're making it a TV show rather than real-life crime?
That doesn't seem to be the objection. The main objection seemed to be there may be a fear of witnesses coming forward to give evidence where thousands of people might be seeing it. But, witnesses are nervous anyway when they come to court, and I think they'll get over those nerves pretty quickly. But just on your point, there is a fear that lawyers will grandstand. But I think that these sort of cases, these very serious cases, which are the ones which are being televised, the senior lawyers will not do that, and it would be a breach of professional standards anyway. But the law moves very slowly, and I have little doubt that we will see this change introduced.
Daniel, it was interesting, I thought, that the people who'd campaigned for this were the media organisations. The media companies were behind this sort of campaign to televise the courts, and I guess in some respects you can see why. But I mean, would anybody actually want to watch this on the TV? I mean, if they had, if they were filming, case after case on Crown Court TV or something channel, I mean, do you think this would be a ratings hit, or will people be bored?
Like the House of Commons TV, nobody watches it. So who would be watching it? Yeah.
Well, the direct answer to your question is very few people. And in fact, the problem with the Judge Munro situation is you'll get a clip on the news and you wouldn't even get the full sentencing explanation and procedure on the news clips. But there are one or two cases which attract the public interest so much, like the ones I've mentioned, where the public will be glued to the ins and outs of the evidence, so that the public itself can understand the process, how cross-examination takes place, how the procedure in criminal trials takes place. After the evidence, closing speeches, and then the sentencing procedure, should there be sentencing. And if you remember, in the Oliver case, he was actually acquitted of the murder, but sentenced to the manslaughter to which he had pleaded guilty. So the short point is there will be cases, and those cases deserve to be aired.
Now, there was one thing that I read about. Is it true there's a time delay just in case the accused shouted anything or rushed forward or did anything? Is there a time delay on this?
Well, there won't be a time delay in the sentencing because we can trust the judges to get it right and not breach anonymity, for instance. But in the cases abroad, there are time delay, and of course the judge will have safeguards in those cases abroad to make sure that prejudicial evidence, which should not be aired, is not aired. So the judges can manage the procedure in those cases abroad.
Daniel, just one final thing quickly. Do you think that there's any suggestion that, might with this open justice, we had open justice and everyone was glued to it, do you think we might see judges handing out some stiffer sentences and sort of pander to the public a bit more, who will look at these things and think and are horrified by the sort of slap on the wrist that criminals tend to get?
Well, dare I say it, I think the pressure comes to the politicians, does it not, for the stiffer sentencing, rather than from the legal profession?
You've been told. One other thing, sometimes, I've seen one of the, accused or the criminals get a sentence and they're very defiant. Well, who cares? I can stand up to I don't think so much of the law. Do we get to see the criminal being sentenced? Or, again, could that have a negative impact in the public to see a defiant criminal getting sentenced?
As things stand, we only see the judge's sentencing remarks. However, if there is the extension that many people like myself would like to see of wider coverage, then you would see the reaction. And why not?
Daniel Janner, thank you very much indeed for being with us today. As always, straight and to the point. Thank you very much.
I thought it was interesting about you saying that, asking about how many people might watch, and you saying about nobody watches the House of Commons. I was always told when I first got elected to Parliament, I was told if you want to keep a secret, make a speech in the House of Commons about it, because nobody's watching. So I suspect it could be the same in the courts too. Now, coming up after the break, as Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss continue their campaigns in the race to replace Boris Johnson, we'll be speaking to one former contender, an MP for Saffron Walden, Kemi Badenoch.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your Saturday morning forecast. It's a warm and a humid one as we start the weekend. Dry across the south at the moment, but elsewhere we've got rain spreading in, and that's all down to this weather front that's been pushing its way in through the course of last night. And with that, we'll see some slightly stronger winds, but the main emphasis is going to be on some pretty heavy rain. So already across much of Scotland, the north of England and Northern Ireland, we've got that rain falling, and it's going to be a wet morning here with some further heavy bursts of rain through the day. It will begin to peter out through the day, but we will also see some rain pushing into Wales, affecting perhaps the Peak District as well. But elsewhere further south, it stays dry with some spells of sunshine around, albeit a little bit cloudier than what we saw through Friday. Warm in the south, temperatures in the mid-20s to locally high 20s in places. Still warm and humid elsewhere, some brighter skies following on later on across Scotland and Northern Ireland. And that's where it's going to turn quite clear and chilly as we go into the overnight period. Elsewhere, though, we keep a lot of cloud, we keep this rain, and further wet weather pushes back into Wales through the small hours of Sunday. So here, turning into quite a wet night. Temperatures 18 or so in the south, very warm indeed. Further north, as I say, getting down into single figures in some of our more rural spots. So a bit of a north-south split through Sunday morning. Lots of bright and fine weather across the northern half of the country, but further south we've got the cloud and we've got these outbreaks of rain. Some of the rain welcome, though, across the southeast, where it's been a very dry July so far. And I think as we go through the rest of the day, we'll continue to see some bits and pieces of rain through much of the afternoon. Despite that, though, still very warm and humid. Temperatures in the mid-20s quite widely. A little bit of a fresher feel further north, but still pleasant in that sunshine. Now, dry for most of us by Monday, the risk of some further wet weather on Tuesday, and all the while our temperatures staying on the warm side. Goodbye.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome back to Saturday morning. It's 10:27. You're here with Esther and Philip, and we're live on TV, radio and online.
And remember, we want to hear your views on all the stories today, so email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us @gbnews.
Now, campaigns are ongoing in the battle for who becomes the next Conservative Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party.
One of the stars of the contest has been Kemi Badenoch, who I'm delighted to say joins us now. Kemi, thank you for joining us. You've had a time to reflect on the leadership contest, which must have been a whirlwind for you. I just wondered what your reflections were on your sort of rapid ascent during that leadership contest.
It was something that I decided to do very last minute. So I was actually really thrilled at the amount of support which I got from a standing start. And I think it reflected the fact that there are many of our MP colleagues who want to see something different, who want a little bit more conservatism and some clarity and courage in terms of how we approach these issues. And that was very pleasing. So despite not getting to the final two, I think that I did really well, and I think I gave a good account of myself. I hope others think so, and we'll see what the future holds.
You certainly did. You certainly did give a very good account of yourself. One of your main parts of your campaign, I guess, was about the war on woke that captured the imagination, I think, of many colleagues and the public at large. I just wondered what your thoughts were on the closing of the Tavistock Centre, given your campaigning on the war on woke.
So I don't call it war on woke, because I think it's far more serious than that. Sometimes when we say war on woke, or we use the word woke, people think that these are trivial issues. What happened at the Tavistock was a very serious child welfare failure, where children were being given experimental treatment that retarded their development. And what is amazing is how long and how much work it took to resolve the problem. I'm so happy that it has closed, because when I was Equalities Minister, I saw a part of it. It was really a health issue, but I saw a part of it when I was responsible for LGBT policy, and I listened to people who had received treatment there, and the stories were harrowing. And what was most difficult for me as a minister was how much internal obstruction there was. People, I say people, official advice, government officials telling me not to meet the clinicians who were whistleblowers, telling me not to meet the children or the young people, as they now are, who had received treatment there, and having to fight so much, because when you start asking questions, all of a sudden meeting minutes get leaked, mysterious FOI requests that want to get all the detail from whistleblowers, something we should be doing to protect them, appear from everywhere. Individuals, not just myself, but people who were the grassroots, who were trying to resolve this issue, getting slurred on Twitter, being called bigots and turfs. I think it's very, very hard to do the right thing now because there's so much obstruction. And that's something that we need to fix.
I was going to ask you about your frustrations of a minister, and then you've explained some of it there. How are, we as a government, whoever's in government, going to overcome those people who are pulling in the opposite direction?
It's very difficult because it isn't just civil servants, and I should say there are actually some brilliant civil servants. So there's a small minority who I think are activists. They are not impartial. There's a large group who will just do whatever's easiest, and then there's some really brilliant ones who helped me do my job. But it's not just within government. We have loads of campaign and pressure groups who are actively pushing to make life difficult for us as Conservatives. Then we have the problem of external organisations who are giving advice that's contrary to the law. That's the Stonewall issue, where they're saying things that the Equality Act does, which it doesn't do. And we even have, in Parliament, we have MPs who buy into this stuff because it's easy. They wear badges and they put hashtags on, they get their likes and their retweets. And it's a lot easier to do things which are fashionable than to do the right thing, which is difficult. And many people do the easy, fashionable thing rather than the right thing, which takes quite a lot of courage and motivation and determination.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on the letters page, you said it took a long time, and that's why we wanted to ask you today. On the letters page today in the Times, it's about the closure of the Tavistock Gender Clinic. And so many, whether it was former advisors, clinicians there, had all come out and said, it was about time it happened. So, right move, but it did take an inordinate amount of time. Now, I know you haven't declared who you're going to support, down to the final two now, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak. I'm going to ask you, are you going to give us breaking news today to see who it is? Because I know Tom Tugendhat's come out today for Liz, so I don't know if you're going to say who you're backing.
So I'm not publicly declaring, and the reason why is because I was a junior minister to both Liz and to Rishi. I like them both. They're very different people. They both have different styles, and I don't think it would be fair for me to pick one above the other publicly. I will have someone who I'll be supporting privately. I think that's the right thing to do, and it's up to the party members now. It's out of the hands of MPs, but I think that we will get two different styles of PM and two different styles of governing, but both would be good. I would be confident with either of them going up against Labour, definitely.
Now, there was a YouGov poll yesterday, Kemi, which I hope you saw, because it showed, it was a poll of Conservative members, and it showed that they asked, who do you want to see in the next Conservative cabinet? And you came out top of that poll, higher than anybody else in the party. So can we take it from what you've just said that you would be happy to serve in a government led by either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak? Because clearly the party members want you to be in that cabinet, whoever's the Prime Minister.
Yes, that's right. I would work with anyone at the end, with either of them. At the end of the day, we're all Conservatives. We're all one team, and what we're doing for the country is more important than who's your closer friend or any of those other sort of personal things that come to light. I'm very flattered that people want to see me in cabinet. There's no guarantee that I will get a job. It'll be fantastic if I do. If I don't, I'm sure there'll be other things, but I know that popularity like this in these polls is often because you haven't done anything to upset anybody yet. And as any former prime minister will tell you, former ministers, once you start making the tough decisions, you become less popular. So I'm not expecting to see those kinds of figures going forward after I take on a tough job. I think I will start slipping down the rankings, and whoever the next new person is will go on top.
Now, just quickly, there's been lots of focus on the fact that the contest has been quite bitter and the blue-on-blue attacks and all the rest of it. Was that your experience of the contest with the other candidates? Is that what you've seen, or did you find the whole thing more harmonious?
Sometimes it looks worse on the outside than it does on the inside. I mean, I remember when we did the TV debates, I had quite a go at Tom Tugendhat, who is a friend of mine, and I asked Rishi a really tough question at the end of it. I spoke to him and I said, I knew you were going to be able to answer that question. We work together, but in a contest, you have to show some differentiation and you have to show, that you're tough. People will try and highlight weaknesses, and the purpose of it is for you to demonstrate your strengths. So I don't think that in the long run this will be an issue. I know Labour think that they've got all sorts of material. They will be very surprised when the winner emerges, and they will find that they won't be able to use any of it, because we tell the truth. We're open about difficulties, we're open about problems, and we talk about how we will resolve them.
Kemi, just one quick final point and answer if you can. Talking of blue on blue, I believe you took your husband off the candidates list so he couldn't be a Conservative MP. I mean, that's blue on blue in your own household.
Exactly. But it's doing the right thing. It's doing the right thing. No conflict of interest.
Kemi, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you for having me.
Now, the Wagatha Crispy trial came to a conclusion yesterday as Rebecca Vardy lost in a whopping $3 million libel case. Well, we'll be taking a look at the details right after this short break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Morning and welcome back. We've got your views coming in thick and fast on an array of topics.
Yes, we've got... let me just have a look here. Stephen, hot off the press, Stephen. You've been fast on the keyboard here. It's nice to see you have Kemi on today. My wife and I supported her in the race to become the leader of the party. She is a breath of fresh air. I think lots of people agree with that.
I've got this one from Kev. Hi, Esther and Phil. Please, please, please don't let the BBC have anything to do with court TV. We were talking to Daniel Giannacusi a little bit earlier about that. And Martin, just listening to the interview regarding the televising of court proceedings, surely witnesses, especially for the prosecution, will be reluctant to appear on screen to the general public and therefore make the trial unfair. Martin saying, ridiculous idea.
And something I can't see whose name this is, but they've said Esther and Philip are spot on. The trouble with televising court cases is the law may seem to be an arse when judges pass what can be perceived as soft sentences. A life sentence with 10 years minimum served for killing a relative who criticised your criminal past does seem light. Then add the arrogance and lack of remorse shown by some criminals and the public could well be left fuming.
I did ask about that, didn't I? If somebody was defiant when they were being sentenced. And here's another one. Don, I totally agree with Philip. You'll love that.
Yeah, no, I don't get many of those, to be honest.
The NHS was created to treat genuine illnesses, and we've got to really prioritise what the NHS is doing. So thank you. Keep your opinions and views coming in. Well, it's the saga that's cost millions of pounds and won't go away. The Wagatha Christie trial came to a conclusion yesterday with the judge ruling that Mrs Vardy was an untrustworthy witness who was likely to have destroyed potentially crucial evidence on purpose.
Mrs Vardy is now expected to foot most of the legal bill, estimated at £3 million. Meanwhile, Colleen Rooney says it should never have gone to court and that the money could have been spent better helping others.
Hear, hear. But joining us now to discuss this is a friend of the show, Andrew Eborn, as we look at the details of what happened and that £3 million bill that was given to Rebecca Vardy.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. A 75-page judgment, basically, which is damning Rebecca
Hang on
Vardy's...
Hold that up. Is that worth £3 million?
3 million quid. Well, I'll tell you what, it's all the lawyers there. As we predicted on May the 23rd when we discussed it, the winners are going to be the lawyers in this case. It is a case which should have never been brought. The most ill-advised defamation case since Oscar Wilde is what I would say. What happened was this, is that, as you know, the wonderful thing about what they call scouse trap, if you like, trying to ascertain who was leaking the stories to the press. And it turned out, Colleen did a little post on social media saying, ... it's basically Rebecca Vardy's account. What the court decided, that was defamatory, but Colleen put up two defences. The first one was that it's true, the best defence ever for defamation. And the other was that it was in the public interest. Well, the judge dismissed the public interest case because they didn't give a balanced view, didn't go back to Rebecca Vardy to counteract the argument, but accepted that it was true. And the reason it was so damning, they said it was likely that she destroyed evidence. It was likely that they got rid of the mobile phone into the North Sea. You remember about Davy's locker and so on and so forth. And so all of those things, what it shows is that people who post things on social media are open for defamation actions. As we predicted, however, the legal fees dwarf what compensation would have been. We're talking about £3 million. It could be more because it might keep on rumbling on. There will be a further hearing to deal with that side. But absolutely tragic. It should never have come to court.
Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I've only had a passing interest in the case, but it seemed obvious to me that Rebecca Vardy was going to lose. So did the lawyers just think, you know, here we go, pound signs? Would they have advised her to say, look, I think this is very... I don't think you should be doing this. And I mean, how?
And because obviously she was taking the case. Yeah, she wasn't defending herself.
Yeah,
she was taking the case.
Yeah. And she did this. And people say she wanted the publicity and so on and so forth. We know that Colleen tried to settle about 4 times. Tried to let's not do this. It's a waste of money. So we know that she tried to.
Right. So when you say that she tried to settle, did she ask for a public apology though?
We don't know what the discussions were. And
but usually that's what prevents people settling. Is they don't want to do the public apology. And if Rebecca Vardy was thinking that way, she thought, no, I'm going to clear my name, I'm not going to apologise. But now an apology and a £3 million price tag is much, much bigger. So I'm with Philip that really the lawyers should have said, you don't stand much chance, don't do it.
Yeah, and they may well have had those discussions. I think anybody, I say it's the most ill-advised defamation action since Oscar Wilde. It's absolutely crazy. It cost a huge... And there's two damages. One is the legal fees, and the second is the reputational damage. She was basically branded as a liar, inconsistent. She found that she destroyed and deleted evidence. It's not a good look.
And who's got £3 million? It looks like they might have to sell their holiday home. And I kind of thought, blummin' heck, I know this is maybe a harsh thing to say, but I don't know how her husband's feeling or anybody else. This could go to another court case, a divorce court case, couldn't it? I mean, I'm sure it would between us two if I gave him a £3 million bill.
Yeah, so, you're right.
Right. Rotten apples.
Oh, rotten apples. Well, this is an extraordinary...
Not what I'm going to throw at you or Philip. Rotten apples.
Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours, as they say, as the series ends, 37 years. But this is about bad neighbours. And what happens, it's rather like family disputes. It is the worst thing ever. Or it's often not about the law, it's about something terrible. This is the case about Barbara Pilcher and Antoinette Williams, who are in the wonderful place of Dunsford, near Godalming in Surrey. They are neighbours. Basically, Antoinette Williams had a tree that was dropping apples and so on and so forth. They were rotten, they attracted wasps, and all of a sudden Barbara Pilcher was scared to go out, and there was all sorts of terrible behaviour. She sued her for harassment. She was awarded in the lower courts at £12,000. It was then taken on appeal by Antoinette Williams. The legal fees have racked up to over 200,000 now. And again, on appeal, they sort of turn around and say, look, Antoinette Williams, you don't have a case. Basically, Barbara Pilcher, she was intimidated. She should have won in the lower courts. But the suffering now is that the lawyers are going to be benefiting. So what's going to happen? The bill is actually about 200 grand for the legal fees. She still gets her 12 grand in compensation, but it's the lawyers, yet again, who are the ultimate winners.
My learned friends, we always say in politics that the worst cases we deal with are neighbour disputes.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's they drag on, and I always say, look, both are constituents. I can't side with one or the other. That doesn't tend to work. But,
Stop them.
but you also have to disclose it when you sell your house if you've had a dispute with a neighbour.
It's horrible. It's neighbours and families. We talked previously about, remember that suitcase about the photographs with Judith Anderson and Diane Ward. Same sort of thing. It should never have gone to court. The damages there would have been minuscule, but the lawyer's fee is about 60, 70 grand.
And again, it'd be awful if you're selling your house to now pay the bills, which mean you might not have her as a neighbour, but you don't also have your own house. I mean, it's a shocking end, isn't it?
Absolutely shocking.
Andrew Ebel, as always, thank you very much
Lovely to see
indeed
you.
for our lawful news.
Now, as more and more people are losing their luggage when they go on holiday, passengers are increasingly turning to tracking devices to help locate them.
It can be frustrating to lose your clothes when you're going on holiday, but imagine if you're an orchestra on tour and you lose all of your instruments. Imagine losing your instruments. Philip. Anyway, joining us now is Tom Redmond, Joint Principal of Cheetham School of Music in Manchester. So, Tom, tell us exactly what happened.
Well, very good morning. We recently took a group of musicians to play on Ischia in the Bay of Naples. We had a brilliant concert, and then we flew back. We went to check in our trombones, which we were supposed to be allowed to carry to the steps of the aeroplane to keep them safe. But on check-in, we were told that we couldn't do that. They had to go to the large baggage area. So they were taken from us, scanned, tagged, and that was the last we saw of them for 29 days. That was on the 1st of July, and they were finally returned to us yesterday after a very frustrating and actually unsettling 4 weeks for the owners of the instruments, who we couldn't even tell where they were. The airline couldn't confirm their location. Were they in Naples? Were they in Frankfurt, where we transferred? Well, they're finally now back in Manchester, but it just doesn't seem quite right that you take that risk when you check in any type of baggage, let alone a cargo worth about £35,000.
Tom, what do you do if you're in an orchestra and you're going abroad to play in a concert and your instrument doesn't show up? How easy is it to sort of get new stuff, borrow new instruments? I mean, what do you do in those circumstances?
Well, it depends where you go. I mean, we were lucky on the way out that our instruments arrived and we were able to play. But had that not been the case, I'm not sure where we would have found 6 trombones on a tuba on a small island in the Bay of Naples. I know a London-based orchestra recently went to the United States, and upon arrival, one of their cargo cases hadn't arrived. And so a call went out on social media, does anyone have any spare trumpets? Now, fortunately, they were in Los Angeles, where there's a big musical scene, and replacements came in for those first couple of concerts. But otherwise, you're really stuck. We came back to Manchester. We had to borrow instruments because we then had an end-of-term concert. We were performing at Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, and our trombone section were all playing upon instruments that weren't their own. We were borrowing from other students, or people who had spares, or people very generously lent us their own instruments from beyond the school. So it's pot luck. And, our situation was really challenging. But had we been in a professional environment, had we come back and not had an instrument for 29 days, that's a month where you can't work. And as a musician, if you don't work, you don't get paid. There's no sick pay. You are basically self-employed. So no instrument, no money.
So the tracking devices, will you now be using those so you can see where your instruments are? I know I was reading about a bride. She was going off on holiday. She had a tracker device. As she landed for her wedding abroad, she could see that her dress was still on the tarmac in England, but at least she could get it eventually out there. She'd gone out, luckily, a week in advance to get a bit of a tan. So what about you? Are you going to have these tracking devices?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we'll really consider. If next time we go on tour, we will put them in the cases. But I mean, yes, it gives you the reassurance of knowing where the instrument is, but that doesn't help you get it back when, airlines are dealing with a lot of lost baggage at the moment, aren't they? So, yeah, it would have been reassuring, I suppose, to know which cargo depot they sat in, but would it have sped up their return? I'm not sure.
And then finally, obviously, this is the UK's leading specialist music school. You are the joint principal there and the head of music. So what other performances can we look forward to?
Well, we've finished for the summer, so we're all enjoying actually being reunited with our instruments and having a rest for a couple of weeks. In the new term, we're performing William Walton's Scenario from Henry V, music by Shostakovich, by Danny Howard. We perform a lunchtime concert every day. We've got 330 students from across the UK, and actually we have these free concerts that the public can come into and enjoy first access to arts and culture within our venues and within our schools. So no, we're looking forward to music being back in our school again in a couple of weeks.
Well, Tom Redmond, thank you very much indeed, and I'm so pleased at being reunited with your trombones.
I used to play the trombone, you know, when I was at school. Very.
I don't think you get a place at Cheetham School.
No, I wouldn't have. No, I've been to see a concert at Cheetham School. It's absolutely magnificent, and I was hopeless, but I did actually play the trombone very badly.
So this is something completely different, but shoppers who scan avocados as onions or champagne as potatoes at supermarket self-service checkouts are set to be caught out by a sophisticated new type of technology. Retailers are reported to be losing $500 million a year from scams at the self-service checkout.
So for more, let's speak to Claire Bailey, founder of the Retail Champion. Claire, thank you very much for joining us. Is this figure going up because of the cost of living crisis? Are people starting to swipe more? Is that the reason for it?
She's nodding her head there, Phil.
Yeah, there's quite a few reasons, but we certainly have seen some problems around people actually not even scamming the self-scan, just stealing products that are of a higher value. And it was certainly reported in the last few weeks that because prices of certain items had gone up quite considerably, that people were shoplifting far more than ever before, which is a real unfortunate sign of the times. But obviously, self-scan has always opened up retailers to the risk of people either mistakenly scanning things or purposefully scanning things wrongly. And a lot of investment into camera technology and weighing technology has been developed over the years to extend the use of the self-checkout, but without obviously extending the losses that they can incur.
I used to work for a supermarket chain for many years, and I guess that when they introduced self-scanning and got rid of lots of checkout operators, they must have known that there was going to be an increase in shrinkage from that.
A nice way of saying shoplifting, shrinkage.
Yeah, shrinkage. But they must be saving a huge amount of money on wages and things like that. So are supermarkets still better off, even though the cost of shrinkage is going up?
Well, I think cost of shrinkage, as you put it, that's all the losses. That also includes things like things getting broken, people dropping a bottle, for example, and obviously not paying for it because they've not paid for it yet. All of those things contribute to the retailer's losses. And the self-checkouts themselves cost quite a lot of money to install. They're quite complex technology, and there always has to be somebody handling them, because I'm sure everybody will appreciate that awful voice, there's something wrong in the bagging area, and then you get the alarm going off. And so they can frustrate a lot of customers. It's said that only 50% of customers actually like them. The rest do prefer to go through a normal till and deal with a human being. So I think it's swings and roundabouts, as you say. There will be a reduction in the overall staffing cost, but we still see plenty of staff servicing those areas. Generally, the development of those self-scanning items was to allow a much more convenient in and out shopping experience for the people who didn't want to get in a queue, maybe only had a couple of items. But it does, of course, as you rightly say, open the retailers up to the risk of people perhaps not scanning things correctly or trying to sneak things through to the bags, which are of similar weight, but by scanning something else instead.
And we said it was meant to be up to £500 million a year that the supermarkets are losing here. So we'll call them what they are, shoplifters, thieves, whatever you want to call them. What are you now going to do when you find these people, if you have got extra cameras in or whatever it is to look at what's going on? What are you going to do? You're going to make sure that they force prosecutions here? How are you going to deal with these? I call them not scanners, but swipers.
Yes. Well, obviously, it's there's lots of stages up to the point that someone is actually officially committing the crime of shoplifting. They have to have left the shop. Up until that point, they could just say, oh, it was a mistake. So we have, for instance, camera technology in supermarkets that watches people around the store, and particular cameras on the high-value items. You'll also notice in the last few weeks, if you've been out shopping in the physical stores, that they've put more security tags on high-value items, things that people might steal. Some of those are very prominent, like on bottles of spirits. Others are much less prominent. They're underneath the label, and they include a magnetic device or even what's called an RFID tag, which tracks the product around the store. So there's technology already before you get to the self-scan that can identify items. That then has to go through the process of being detached, taking off that big top off a bottle of vodka, let's say. Somebody does that for you and they watch you scan it, so you can't really avoid that one. The other items will set off the alarms as you exit the store if they haven't been properly scanned because it's not been deactivated. So all of these little stages along the way prevent the person from walking out. If they walk out and the alarms go off, if they come back and surrender the goods, they've still not committed a crime. It's only if they continue to go and then evade the return, that's when the crimes happened. So obviously, all of these little bits along the way stop people from taking the product.
Claire Bailey, founder of the Retail Champion, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm rather hoping that we might get shops that go away from self-scan and go back towards checkouts again. And you never know, these things seem to go around in circles, so I'm living in hope. Anyway, coming up, we'll be going through more of the day's top store with Simon Danchuk.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello, good morning. You're watching and listening to Saturday Morning on GB News with me, Esther McVeigh, and Philip Davis.
Yes, indeed. We've got a fantastic hour lined up for you today. The Justice Committee has warned that female prison population could rise by a third within the next 3 years. So is it time to develop alternatives to custodial sentences for women offenders? We're also looking into deregulation and if it can help ease the current cost of living crisis, as a new report suggests it could save families up to £9,000 a year.
And with the Lionesses ready to roar against Germany, is it time for more attention to be given to women's football? We'll be hearing from sports broadcaster Aidan McGee later today. Well, we'll have more stories and those stories too, but first it's time for your news headlines with Alice.
Good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Rail services are being severely disrupted across the country following the latest round of industrial action. Thousands of drivers from 7 train companies have walked off the job as part of a series of strikes over pay and conditions. It's affecting football fans travelling to opening games of English leagues, as well as people trying to get to the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. More strikes will be staged next month, which travel editor at The Independent, Simon Calder, says will be even worse.
In 2 weeks' time, a much bigger strike, because that will bring in Avanti West Coast, which runs from London to the West Midlands, North West England and into Scotland, and also Cross Country, which does lots of stuff, particularly centred on Birmingham. If, for example, you wanted to travel on the Great Western region, and that's a really significant one, as you can imagine this time of year, there are no trains serving Devon and Cornwall.
The RMT Union's former Assistant General Secretary Steve Headley told GB News there are a number of steps the government must take to resolve the dispute.
People will just not sit there and let their homes become cold because they can't heat them, because they've got no gas, because we've got profiteering companies. And the answer is quite simple. The government have to legislate, the government have to nationalise these companies, like France has just done with EDF, and they've got to make sure that this inflation crisis is brought under control.
In a huge blow to Rishi Sunak, former Tory leadership contender Tom Tugendhat has endorsed Liz Truss in the race to become Prime Minister. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee says her promises of tax cuts are based on true Conservative principles and that only she can unite the party. He says both contenders have huge qualities and many talents, but Ms Truss has an advantage on the world stage because of her cabinet position. But Conservative MP Andrew Bowie told GB News Rishi Sunak would be a better leader given the cost of living crisis.
When Chancellor created the furlough scheme that saved 11 million jobs in a matter of days, saved thousands of businesses from going bust with the bounce back scheme and other support measures to support them, introduced e-tax help out that saved so many of our hospitality industries from going bust over the summer of 2020. So I think when you look at it in the round, Rishi has demonstrated by his actions as Chancellor that he's very, very willing and able to deliver short-term measures to support people who are struggling.
The lawyer for victims and families impacted by the infected blood scandal says they must be compensated immediately. It's after the inquiry chairman said more than 2,000 surviving victims should receive £100,000 each without delay. About 2,400 people died in what's been labelled the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS, after patients were given contaminated blood products in the 1970s and 1980s. In a major shake-up of the youth prison system, the government is building the UK's first secure school for young offenders. It will house some of the most dangerous criminals in the country, aged between 12 to 18, including those who've committed murder. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab, who visited the site in Rochester in Kent, says the radical change in approach aims to break the cycle of crime.
And that is the difference, and that is the ethos change and the regime change that you'll see in a place like this. And what it means for those hard-to-reach young people who've committed some serious crimes is they get a chance to go through a school curriculum. Many of them will have been truants or expelled, and actually sit down and learn and get those skills. They'll get training. There's going to be small-scale farming done on the site, so they can get some vocational training as well. And we know, in the evidence from the US, from Spain, from Scandinavian jurisdictions, is that with this particularly tough to reach young group, it is the key to giving them an opportunity to turn their life around and fundamentally reducing the very high levels of reoffending from young offender institutes, and that will keep our streets safer.
Boris and Carrie Johnson are hosting a wedding party at the Cotswolds estate of a major Tory donor. A huge white marquee has been erected on the grounds of Daylesford House. The event will commemorate the couple's wedding, which was held during COVID restrictions in Westminster Cathedral in May last year. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther McVeigh and Philip Davis.
We're live on your TV, radio and online, so make sure you get involved by emailing us, gbviews at GBNews, or tweet us at GBNews throughout the show. We want to know what you're thinking about, what we're talking about. Go on, we start today, as always, looking at the stories. Joining us in the studio here is Simon Danchuk. What has caught your eye in today's papers?
Big story, I think, column in the Daily Mail. Who will speak up for the working class white boys who've become Britain's new oppressed minority, by Matthew Goodwin. Important because it shows some facts about who are going to our top universities, Cambridge, Oxford, the Russell Group of universities. It shows that the greatest proportion, over 40% of Chinese who are going to that university now. Next down is 16%, just over 16% Asian, 10.6% black, and so the lowest proportion are from white communities, and that's 10.5%. And so it really challenges. So if you read one column today, I would suggest reading this, because it's about whether we are being too woke in terms of creating too much diversity, to the point where white people, who are clearly in the majority, are actually the minority going to our universities. And I think we have to challenge that.
I completely agree with you. It's without a doubt the people who are doing the worst in educational outcomes, often in the criminal justice system, are white working class boys in particular. And not enough focus is ever given to them.
But do they explain why? Do they say why this is? Or are we now, as a society, pushing everybody, say, to university? These lads don't want to do it. They want to be setting up businesses. They want to be doing apprenticeships. They want to sort of be getting on and doing stuff. Are we letting them down, the educational system, telling them what to do? Does it explain any of that?
Well, I think some of it is explained by the fact that these universities want to attract funds, and so we have a large proportion of wealthy Chinese people sending the children to our top universities.
OK, because they get paid a lot more for foreign students. I've got you.
But I think he concludes well. He says, as the latest statistics suggest, it is one of the best places, the UK, in the world to be a member of an ethnic minority. At the same time, we need to speak up loudly for white working-class children. I couldn't agree more with that, actually. It's a good piece.
No, I very much agree. Now, my favourite story in the paper today, well, I say favourite, irritating, page 27 of The Sun.
See, he loves this. He pretends he loves to be angry about something.
I'm from Yorkshire, we like complaining.
Yeah.
Page 27 of The Sun, million hit by hosepipe ban, worst drought since 1976. So England's first hosepipe ban of the summer was confirmed yesterday as the nation faces its worst drought. Now, up to 1 million southern water customers will be hit with restrictions on Friday, prohibited from watering the gardens, filling, paddling pools, washing cars, all that kind of stuff. But then it's the next paragraph that particularly irritates me. There are also water shortages in Yorkshire and the South East. Now, look, I can get that in the South East and in the South you can have water shortages because it doesn't rain a fat lot, does it? Water shortages in Yorkshire is an absolute disgrace. Yorkshire Water should be hanging their heads in shame. Every year, virtually, my constituency gets flooded in parts, as does many parts of Yorkshire, West Yorkshire in particular, and they haven't got enough water to see us through the year, despite us getting flooded nearly every winter. I mean, what an absolute shambles. Now, if we're going to be in this situation where we're going to have prolonged dry spells and maybe more flooding, I mean, I'm not an expert in these matters, I concede, but why don't they build more reservoirs so that when we have these prolonged dry periods, they've got more water stored up from when we were flooded? I mean, is that not an obvious... It seems to have bypassed Yorkshire Water But is that not an obvious solution?
You did ask them to come on?
I did ask Yorkshire Water to come on, but probably...
They wouldn't.
They wouldn't come on. They were basically saying that they couldn't come on because I think their excuse was our viewers wouldn't be able to differentiate between Yorkshire and other parts of the country. I mean, absolutely...
I agree.
Absolutely...
How rude, for starters.
Exactly, absolutely shocking.
I drive around Lancashire and I'm listening to the radio and there's adverts on it from United Utilities telling us to save water, telling us to have a shorter shower, telling us to turn the tap off sooner, etc. And all the time that I'm driving around, it's raining. It's constantly raining. There's nothing more annoying.
A shortage of water in Manchester.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like a shortage of sand in Saudi Arabia, isn't it? A shortage of water in... I just don't understand it. They need to book their ideas up, in my opinion.
Now, I've got two stories here, but I wanted to start with a friend of our show and also of GB News, and that's Sir Christopher Mayer, who passed away. He's died aged 78, and tributes are coming from all around the world and from all political parties because, you know, people say he was the very best in British diplomacy. He was the ambassador to the US for most of his career, but I just wanted to say, you know, a big thank you to him and what a wonderful chap he was. And if you ever wanted a story about what was happening in America, he was the man who had his ear to the ground there. So that's the wonderful late Sir Christopher Mayer. Now, this one I found a different story in the Saturday Guardian magazine, because, like I said, Philip's never happier than when he's complaining or grumbling. And this is all about how to argue well, how to do a good debate. You win some, you lose some, because people say, look, we've lost the ability to debate and have a discussion. We become polarised, and then you'd rather not speak to a friend than be able to talk through a subject. And this one was between two friends, and it was about the vaccine and how that polarised people, COVID-19 and the vaccine. He said most people fall into a couple of groups, either a preacher telling you what to do, a prosecutor mode attacking you, or it says a politician mode, and that means you only listen to people who agree with your opinion. But they're saying we've got lazy, we're not really thinking about how the discussion, you're not learning anymore, you're not understanding a little bit from one another, you're not embracing the shades of grey. And it's just a wonderful piece about that. And I think that is true. Now, people talk about social media, tweet, you only listen, you know, it's like an echo chamber. But it's saying even between friends now, we'd sooner not. Instead, you said you'd sooner not speak to a friend and you'd sooner listen to a stranger if they share your view. What do you think, Phil? You love an argument.
Yeah, I think this is a load of absolute rubbish, isn't it? It says here, Simon, honestly, a good debate isn't about one person declaring victory. Absolute rubbish, isn't it? I mean, everybody loves to win an argument, don't they? I've got to say, I'm still trying. I've been trying for years to... I've never yet won an argument with Esther on anything, to be perfectly honest. So I keep... So it's easy for her to be magnanimous when she wins all these arguments, but I keep trying. I'd love to declare victory in an argument.
Well, one day I'll let you, when I'm in the mood.
But do you not think people like to... This is typical Guardian stuff, isn't it?
I go out with my family, my dad and my brothers, and we have a cracking argument in the pub, a real debate, and it gets quite fierce, but everyone goes home happy and a bit merry, perhaps, by the end of the day. I think it's good to have a...
That's the key thing, isn't it? It's the key thing is not taking it personally and all the rest of it, but you should be able to have a good, robust argument and all the rest of it.
No, I'm agreeing with it. They were just saying, here are tips to be able to do it. Most people have stopped doing it and wouldn't hear how you can embrace arguing. You don't need any tips in that. It could have been some of our viewers who might be interested in tips in how to embrace arguing.
I need a tip in not arguing. I think that'd be perfect.
I'll take them from the Guardian. That's...
Simon Danchuk, brilliant. Thank you for joining us again today. Now, the Justice Committee have warned the government that the female prison population could rise by a third within the next 3 years.
They say that limited progress has been made in developing alternatives to custodial sentences for women.
So joining us from Manchester is the head of Prisons Partnership and Participation of Women in Prison, and that is Kate Fraser. Hi, Kate. Thanks for joining us today. So just a question first. Are there cases or certain crimes that you think women should always go to prison for? Are there certain cases that are so bad or offences that are so bad that women should go to prison?
Of course, I think we have to accept that there are some women, a very, very small percentage of women, who have committed quite serious crimes, and communities are safer for them being in a prison. I think what we also have to accept is that, nearly probably 70% of women are there for low-level petty crime and would be better rehabilitated in the community rather than in a prison.
Well, you say that, but I'm looking here at the sentences here. I've got the figures in front of me from the Ministry of Justice about women that are in prison. And according to this, 30th of June 2021, the number of sentenced women in prison, obviously some are on remand and things like that, but the number of women who were in prison who had been sentenced was 2,523. And I'm looking here, you say that they're there for minor offences. 896 there are in there for violent crimes, violence against the person crimes. 223 are there for sexual offences. 265 are in there for robbery. 300 are in there for burglary. We've got 33 in there for theft, about 80 for arson, 322 for drug offences. I mean, that pretty much wraps up the whole lot of them. Do you consider those to be minor offences? Because I'm not sure that many of our viewers would.
I think we would have to look at those offences on a case-by-case basis. But of course, it would be foolish to deny that some of those are quite serious offences. But I think we're missing the bigger picture here. The bigger picture is that 70% of women who are in prison at this very moment haven't committed any form of violent crime. And for those women who are serving short sentences, those women who are caught up in that revolving door of doing a short time in the community, going in custody, going back out to the community, going back into prison, those women would be better rehabilitated in the communities rather than in prisons.
And what sort of rehabilitation would that be? And how then would you supervise it and say they are now rehabilitated?
Well, I think we already have a system in place. So, for example, in Greater Manchester, where I'm based, we have a network of women's centres. So there's one women's centre in each of the local authority areas. These are centres that work closely with women, that quite often have probation staff co-located at those centres, where they can see their probation staff, they can be supervised by probation staff, but at the same time, women's centre staff will work with those women to really look at the underlying causes and addressing some of the issues around why women get swept up into crime in the first place. We have that system in place in Greater Manchester, and there is in fact a network of these women's centres all across the UK. There's lots of data there to show that it does actually work. In Greater Manchester, we have a reoffending rate of around about 13 or 15% compared to other metropolitan areas where it's about 23%, where they don't have this whole system approach for women. And yet none of these centres have sustainable funding. The government the government itself acknowledges that most women shouldn't be in prison, with the majority of women in prison, as I say, serving sentences of 6 months or less. The government know this. In 2018, they published a strategy where they promised to reduce the women's prison population. But here we are again with the Justice Select Committee report, another report concluding that there just hasn't been enough progress.
Can I just say what the Ministry of Justice did say? It said custody is used as a last resort for women since launching the Female Offenders Strategy in 2018, and the number entering prison has fallen by nearly a third. So that's what they're saying. So although you say it predicted what could happen, at the moment what has happened, it has fallen by a third.
Can I just ask, well, why is this focus on women prisoners? There's 30 times more male prisoners
How many more times?
30.
30.
30 times more male prisoners than female prisoners. According to all the figures, if you commit a crime, a man is much more likely to be sent to prison than a woman already. So why do we need to have further initiatives to prevent women from going to prison? I mean, in these days of when everyone believes in sex equality, surely if you believe in sex equality, surely you believe the court should treat everybody the same who comes before them, irrespective of whether they're a man or a woman. You can't just have sex equality when it suits and then start arguing for special treatment when it suits, surely.
Well, I think we have to understand that even though we talk about equality, there are certain ways in which women are doubly disadvantaged in the criminal justice system. So yes, quite rightly, as you say, 95% of the prison population is made up of men. Women make up the very small 4 to 5% of the prison population, but we often find women being disproportionately sentenced for offences such as non-payment of council tax, or for their children not attending school, or for not having a television licence. And for those women doing those very, very short sentences, it's simply custody doesn't work. And what it does do, particularly because mum is quite often the primary or the sole carer, is that it breaks up families, it causes harm to communities, it causes irreparable damage towards children. And, there are, as well as those kind of moral costs, there are huge financial costs. Sending women to prison costs about £50,000 a year to send a woman to prison, where she can be supervised in the community by probation, still with all the same conditions in place, and get this wraparound support from women's centres for around about £10,000 to £15,000.
Kate Fraser, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Now, in the studio, we have Mimi Gardner, founder of Restore Justice, which campaigns for tougher sentences for criminals. So, Mimi, you heard what Kate said there. Should women be treated more advantageously in the criminal justice system?
To be very honest, I, like you, Philip, I listen to your point, do not understand why we should have equality everywhere else in every aspect of life aside from the criminal justice system. Women are already treated more leniently in the criminal justice system because various aspects are being taken, various factors are being taken into account. Surely the point is that of the criminal justice system, that we deal with criminals. These women, as you quoted the figures, it shows that they're not some minor offences. They're not in custody, in prison for some minor offences. They're in prison because they have committed serious offences. And I would like to dispute Kate's figure of 75% of non-violent crimes, which she said women are in prison for, which is simply untrue. If you look at the figures that have come out 2 days ago, you can see that those that are sentenced, that are in prison, already sentenced for their crimes, the largest cohort is actually women who are there, who are sentenced to 4 to 14 years in prison, and also those above 12 months, which means that these are surely more serious crimes that they've been convicted of and sent to.
Can you have any sympathy with what Kate says there? If this is the mum, maybe the breadwinner, she's got a family there, is there other things that you think, instead of going to prison, it could be better to have this, as she put it, sort of surround support, as it were, to help them rehabilitate and not go to prison?
Well, I would actually answer with a question: who has sympathy for the victims in here? Because it seems that all of these organisations seem to be in favour of sending female criminals out of prison, or not send them to prison in the first place, and get more female criminals out of prison. But we need to bear in mind that there's victims of crime, and who considers the needs of victims here?
I just wondered about one thing I should have asked Kate, was about what happens when people self-identify as women. If a man self-identifies as a woman, should they be
tricky territory then, aren't we?
Should they be treated more? How would that work? I'm not entirely sure how that would work.
Well, absolutely. The point here is that if we all of a sudden say, well, first of all, we would discriminate based on sex. Surely we can't have discrimination based on sex. If that doesn't work in all other walks of life, if we are to have 50-50 men and women in the boardrooms, etc., in all other walks of life, we're saying there should be equal representation of men and women, But in the criminal justice system, we shouldn't be sending women to prison because they're women, because they have distinct needs, because they're more vulnerable, and that they pose a less serious risk to the public. I just simply do not accept that, and it would open up floodgates with men self-identifying as women. And also...
Mimi Gardner, I think we're going to have to wrap up this, but we get where you're going. And what I want to know is what our viewers think. Should we be taking a softer approach to women and them not have to go to prison? Or, as Mimi's saying, no, if you do the crime, you pay the time. Well, coming up, we'll be looking at how the government could deregulate some sectors, possibly saving families up to £9,000 a year.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip, live on your TV, radio and online.
Now, could deregulation help ease the current cost of living crisis?
Recent data published by the Institute for Economic Affairs suggests it could save UK families £9,000 a year.
They say that parents could be £4,000 better off if the childcare sector was deregulated, and the removal of green levies could save consumers an additional £500 a year.
Join us now to discuss the report is Matthew Lesh, Head of Public Policy at the IEA. Matthew, thank you very much for joining us. So how realistic is it that people could save £9,000 a year from just simply by deregulating?
Look, that is certainly an estimate, but the underlying point here is that in the debate about cost of living, we've heard a lot of discussion about government handouts, about transfers of people. And while that can certainly provide some short-term relief, in the end, it's more like shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic rather than growing the economy, making us more prosperous and lowering the structural underlying causes of the cost of living. And in the paper, we analyse quite a number of fields, particularly focusing on issues like housing, childcare, employment regulation, sin taxes, trade and tariffs, that are all areas where the government has heavily intervened. And we've seen substantial price rises in recent decades, where the UK consumers are paying a lot more than they should and a lot more than comparable countries. If you just take an issue like childcare, where the UK has some of the most stringent child to staff ratios in Europe, there's no reason to think childcare is suboptimal in any other country, and yet the UK has a far more restrictive system, as well as a far more invasive system in terms of educational requirements. And we've, in that period of time over the last 20 years, seen huge increases in the price of childcare as we put more and more regulation in place.
Matthew, I just thought on the childcare front, I mean, you say that parents could save £4,000 a year if they were deregulated. I mean, first of all, you know, might parents not want to send their kids to somewhere where there's the person's looking after more children from a safety point of view? And even if they did, might the £4,000 go into the pocket of the childcare provider rather than go back into the hands of the consumer?
Look, on the specific question, the ratios, they're minimum, they're not maximum. So the government's currently talking about a slight change to the ratios for 2 to 3 year olds to bring England into line with Scotland, so it would increase from 4 to 5. Now, if a parent decides that's not what they want for their child and they don't think it's particularly appropriate at the nursery to have that kind of arrangement, no one is going to force that upon them. What we're saying, though, is that if it would be appropriate if you've got someone with a lot of skills who can take care of a few more children, across Europe, in many countries, they can take care of 8, 9, 10 children at a time. Maybe that isn't necessarily the way it would end up in every case. But if that could end up like that in some cases, it could definitely ensure more access in more places for childcare at a lower cost for parents if they want to take up that option. In terms of who's going to end up benefiting, I mean,
Matthew, if I just got limited time, so I just want to ask one more question, if that's possible. Are you saying sort of high regulation, high prices, low regulation, low prices, but do people see high regulation with high safety? Are people now too risk averse that what you're saying will never happen?
Look, I think that's a risk, but I certainly hope not. I mean, the point you want to make is that red tape is over-regulation. You know, it's not necessarily that you have no standards whatsoever. It's that you have the minimum possible necessary standards to achieve your goal, so that there aren't imposing unnecessary costs and unnecessary burdens on suppliers of goods and services. And we've seen an extraordinary regulation of the economy over the last 20 to 30 years in every field of life. The government has put their tentacles in with very specific regulations and very invasive regulators. If we can undo that a bit, we can reduce the cost of businesses, we can produce more, we can be more productive, we can have lower prices for consumers.
Matthew Leash from IEA, thank you very much indeed. And I think this is something that we're going to have to return back to, because we are going to have to start taking the cost of things down. And regulation seems to be one of maybe the key places that we can do it. But still to come on Saturday morning, we'll be taking a look at all of the weekend sport and showbiz. But first, here's the news headlines with Alice.
It's 11:33. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news this hour. Lincolnshire police have released CCTV images of a man they want to question over the fatal stabbing of 9-year-old Lilia Valitute in Boston on Tuesday. They're appealing to the public for help in identifying the man and are urging anyone with any information to come forward. Rail services are being severely disrupted across the country following the latest round of industrial action. Thousands of drivers from 7 train companies have walked off the job as part of a series of strikes over pay and conditions. It's affecting football fans travelling to opening games of English leagues, as well as people trying to get to the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. In a huge blow to Rishi Sunak, former Tory leadership contender Tom Tugendhat has endorsed Liz Truss in the race to become Prime Minister. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee says her promises of tax cuts are based on true Conservative principles and that only she can unite the party. The lawyer for victims and families impacted by the infected blood scandal says they must be compensated immediately. It's after the inquiry chairman said more than 2,000 surviving victims should receive £100,000 each without delay. About 2,400 people died in what's been labelled the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS after patients were given contaminated blood products in the 1970s and 1980s. The government is building the UK's first secure school for young offenders. The site in Kent will house some of the most dangerous criminals in the country, aged between 12 to 18, including those who've committed murder. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says the radical change in approach aims to break the cycle of crime. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome back. What time is it now? Just coming up to 11:36. So we've got your views. Come on, Phil, the views.
The thing about sending women to prison has certainly captured people's imagination. Colleen in Rutland says this is a non-argument. There's no difference in the effect of crimes committed by women to those committed by men. Men and women should be treated the same. That's what activists keep banging on about.
John Ashmore, if you do the crime, you do the time. I'm with that one. And Sean here says, I'm sorry, but what is the difference between the rehabilitation of men and women? So if you're going to rehabilitate one, you've got to do it to the other.
And Goatee says, why should women be treated any different from men? Many men in prison are there for petty offences too. This is just bias.
So keep your views coming in. Now, Southwark Council in London has been criticised for launching an inclusion charter for its schools, as it encourages them not to exclude disruptive pupils.
The council say that it needs to promote the inclusion of badly behaved pupils within their classes to reduce the number who end up becoming expelled.
But Tom Bennett, school behaviour advisor to the Department of Education, has questioned the policy, claiming it will damage the chances of other students to be safe, dignified in a safe learning space.
Joining us now is the Chief Executive of Carlton Academy Trust in Bradford, Adrian Neeshaw. Adrian, what do you make of this idea of zero exclusion policies?
I'm generally, well, I'm not in favour. I'm with Tom Bennett on this one here. Essentially, for me, it's a lowering of standards. The best I could say on this is that it's well-intentioned, but there's, with lots of things which are well-intentioned, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And when I think back to when I was at school, I wasn't always a good student. I knew where the barriers were and what I could get away with. And those students at those schools will quickly learn what the barriers are, and standards will drop in behaviour and generally around the school. Now, reading this charter, there seems to be, I would question somewhat the logic applied to it, in that there seems to be a belief that if students are in school, it stops them involving criminality on the streets and gangs, etc. Now, I don't believe that the effects of school attendance is enough to prevent that. The allure of gangs and criminality are very, very strong. And I've seen, sadly, in some of the schools I've been involved in, how the students, even though they've been good attenders, have been dragged into gangs, and then it's affected the conduct in school and sadly led to permanent exclusions. And the other thing I'd like to challenge as well, which I think people don't really understand, is there seems to be an impression that schools exclude and then students are put out onto the streets. Now, it's a very regulated area, school exclusions, and if you do exclude the student, by the 6th day at the very latest, you must provide alternative education and strictly instruct parents not to have students out during school hours. So that just shouldn't happen.
But, I mean, is excluding kids passing it from the problem just onto another school at some point? I mean, is it just a merry-go-round where they just, you exclude them from your school and they just rock up at another school and then cause disruption to that school? It's not really solving the problem, I guess, is it?
Well, sometimes there's entrenched problems which schools can't solve. So when they do get excluded, there's a variety of responses depending on the severity of the circumstances. One could be, as you mentioned there, start another school. I mean, I could call that a fresh start rather than just dumping the problem somewhere else, or put into a specialist unit to deal with their particular issues and problems. And for me, that's what is very appropriate to it. But also, which is overlooked in all this discussion, is the impact upon the victims here. Now, consider yourself a parent of a girl, boy who've been a victim of an assault, probably even a sexual assault. the student isn't excluded, and then the perpetrator comes back into school and they're sat in the classroom with the victim. And this does happen, and it often leads to the victim having to leave the school rather than the perpetrator.
A very good point there. But finally, if you don't exclude, what sanctions do you have to children who misbehave?
Well, the sanctions are, the lower end of things are detention, but that's, it's very low tariff, isn't it, for the severity of the situation we're talking about with exclusions. And then we go on to internal isolation, which is a temporary solution within schools. And then some schools have internal alternative provision within the school. And we've got that in some of the schools in my trust, been very, very successful in dealing with some of those students. And they've actually said they've been taken away from crime and criminality. And some even said stop being killed and things. But even with all that in place, and most schools have those sort of provision nowadays in the challenging areas, you still have to, sadly, make a permanent exclusion.
Adrian Neeshaw, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
I bet you our viewers will have views on this as well. What do you think?
I think our viewers will be with Adrian. I'm certainly with him. He's a proper no-nonsense head teacher, isn't he? We need more like Adrian in my book.
Now, we are all well into the summer months, and you know that you're going on holiday and you want to look the part. You want to be sort of fit and slim, whether that's by the beach or by the pool.
I don't know why you're looking at me. There is one fitness coach who may just be able to get you looking stunning without having to spend hours in the gym.
Yes, that's Lucy Windham-Reid. She's a fitness coach who has posted a series of 7-minute exercise videos on YouTube, all designed to be super easy for people of any shape or size and fitness level. And she joins us now. Can I tell you, Lucy, I think this is my favourite show ever here on GB News for Saturday morning, because I believe you're going to transform before my very eyes.
Look amazing. You don't
Philip Davis. Oh. Philip Davis with some of your 7-minute workouts.
Are you going to show me what I need to be doing, Lucy?
I'm going to show you some easy workouts that we can all do at home. And I think for me, also about fitness, it's about our mental health as well as physical health. And my job as a trainer is to just show everyone we can all move more. And 7 minutes, let's be honest, we've all got 7 minutes, haven't we?
So move more. Philip, that's what we're saying.
I'm horrified at this idea.
I'm loving this. This is on tape forever, Phil.
OK.
Remember, we can't afford a by-election, Lucy.
Have we got you? Have we got you on shot? Can we see you there?
No, let's hope not.
Yeah.
There we go.
Have we got you? Oh, yeah, we're there.
There we are. So I'm going to show you some really simple moves that we can do that are all standing and simply using body weight. So we can do it in 7 minutes. And the first exercise we're going to do is called Skater's Lunge. So shall I show you? What we're going to do is we're just going to go from one side to the other. Do you want to have a go at doing that? Your lace is a bit undone. That's it.
Your opposite arms.
Opposite arm.
Phil, it's opposite arm.
Is it like
not the same one?
Is it like this?
So Lucy, it's kind of like that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the other arm. So you're going to just imagine. So you're just going to reach it across. But in all fairness, it's about moving your body. So it's even just doing simple things like just doing a knee raise.
You might think that's simple.
Just doing, well, I bet you can do this. Just
let me try this one.
There you could do that. So you could do that
to get my knees higher.
You could do that for 60 seconds. I'm
not sure I could do it for 60 seconds, to be perfectly honest.
We could even do something where you're just doing like shadow boxing.
Okay, that's how he dances, Lucy. Can I tell you, this is how he dances.
That's Theresa May. You're mixing me up with Theresa May there.
But also, in all fairness, I think the message we're trying to get across is so many people are struggling with fitness. They think it's all about going to the gym, spending hours, that you have to come down onto the floor. You can do something just as simple as doing a step-back lunge, doing that. And by doing just 7 minutes, choosing 7 moves, it's going to just really help.
Did you hear that crack?
But this is going to help with your joints.
It's not helping my joints, Lucy.
It will help your joints if you do that.
Cracking away here.
Lucy, keep going, ignore him.
OK.
I'm getting a sweat on here.
So the thing is, with exercise, it's about just finding moves that you enjoy. And so many people are struggling since lockdown. I think in lockdown, a lot of people were really driven to keep moving or not, one or the other. And since we've come out of lockdown, people think they haven't got time. And it's about finding time, making time. So 7 minutes, even, OK, so if you don't like doing the the exercises. I've got loads on my YouTube channel. I've got over 1,000
Don't give up, Lucy.
workouts.
You're helping me here. He promised that his exercise was starting the 1st of August and he was losing half a stone. This is the start. He's going to be taping this and watching it every day.
So just a lunge back. So stand with your feet slightly wider than hip width distance apart, and you're just going to step one leg back, and then you can take your arms up. I mean, in all fairness...
You make it look so easy, Lucy. This is a problem. You're making it look so easy.
You are wearing a suit and shoes. So, you know, you'd want to be in gym equipment. But also, I think what's really important is to think about people perhaps with limited mobility. If you're seated, you know, just doing exercises, kick your legs out, punch your arms. It's just about moving the body.
You see, I like going from vertical on the settee to horizontal on the settee.
Lucy and Philip, we're going to leave you there exercising. You've got another couple of minutes while we go to the break. But don't forget, come back, because we'll have the latest showbiz and we'll have the latest sport stuff. No, we're not going there. No, my mistake. We're going to go to Birmingham as it hosts the weekend at the Commonwealth Games. Our Midland reporter, Will Hollis, is there covering the event so far. So, Will, what's happening with you? I know what's happening here in the studio. It's getting ugly as Phil and Lucy are doing exercises, but what's happening with you?
Yeah, I'm keeping my feet firmly on the ground, but there are a lot of people doing exercise, of course, because it is the Commonwealth Games. There are activities all throughout the day. I think it was about 69 medals up for grabs. Right behind me, there's been the marathon runners that have gone through. The men have gone through, as well as the men and women's paras. We're waiting for the women to go through just behind me as well. But in the very background, that's Birmingham New Street, the central railway station here that most people would have been hoping to use to get into Birmingham City for the Commonwealth Games. But a lot of people are struggling because, as we've been reporting all day, there are rail strikes going on up and down the country. 7 rail services affected, train operators affected. One of them that's going to be quite affected here is West Midlands trains, and that's because there's no services running on those ones. Most other rail services are running a severely limited service. ASLEF train drivers, part of the ASLEF union, 5,000 of them are on strike right now. That's because of a pay dispute. One of the things that the rail delivery group that represents train services says is that this has been targeted to happen on the Commonwealth Games to cause disruption to the Commonwealth Games, as well as the start of the football season. On the other side, the ASLEF drivers union said that they simply had to. They wouldn't have wanted to. Nobody wants to be on strike. They'd rather be working. But because of this pay dispute and not getting anywhere, they felt that they had to. So you are going to see lots of problems if you were trying to get a train out here to the Commonwealth Games. But I will say that Birmingham 2020 have been really clear on the guidance, saying try not to get a train if you can, because the services that are running are going to be incredibly busy. One of the things that they've done is they've put on lots of bus services, because this is supposed to be the most eco-friendly, environmentally friendly and sustainable games that there's ever been. Lots of bus services, but they are also encouraging you to get on a bike or walk around. There's signs everywhere around this city for the different places where you might want to go and see your local, see your country that you're supporting earn a medal, or go and just see what's going on. Lots of people from around Birmingham that we've been speaking to are just excited to see this happening in their home city, even if they are finding it a little bit harder to get round because of things like this. The marathon right the way through the middle that's going up to Victoria Square, that's where a lot of things have been happening, right in the middle of the nucleus, where it's this big fan zone. So if you're on the other side, you won't be able to see it, but there's lots of cars piling up. But everybody knew this was happening. 4 years in the making, and a few $100 million to bring the Commonwealth Games and the world's attention right here to Birmingham.
Will Hollis, thank you very much indeed. It's brilliant news. I know I'm excited that this is happening. We've got the Lionesses, we've got the Commonwealth Games. I want to see medals in the studio.
Well, I was going to say, after my workout there with Lucy, it could be next stop, could be the Commonwealth Games for me. What do you?
I'd blank that out completely.
I've got a sweat on after all that, I tell you.
Joining us in the studio is Aidan McGee to talk about what's going on, because I think it's a summer of sport in a way, and hopefully medals. And we've also got Hayley Palmer who's going to tell us what's happening in the world of showbiz. So should we go to you first, Aidan?
Got to start with the Lionesses, haven't we?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I mean, look, I watched the semi-final on Tuesday. England were hugely impressive against Sweden. I felt that might be, in fact, I probably said to you last Saturday that might be the litmus test, because Sweden were ranked second in the world. they were made to look distinctly average. Germany, though, responded in turn by playing the following day at Stadium MK. They had an extra 2 days extra rest before they played France, and that made a big difference. It certainly does make a difference at elite sport level. They got through. They looked very impressive. Alex Popp popped up with 2 goals, as we might say, and she looks like one of the best strikers in Europe, actually. So that leads us into tomorrow. It will be different because neither side is really having much experience of playing in front of 90,000 supporters at Wembley. It's fantastic for the women's game that they're able to showcase their ability and how far they've come in front of an audience like that. In terms of how it's going to finish, I'm not so sure. I just think Germany have got so much pedigree in this tournament. Prior to the last one, they won 8 of the previous 9. Of course, the game's changed and the standards changed immeasurably.
You'll be going all negative on us now.
No, I'm not being negative. I'm just saying that this is... Don't expect this to be a read-through tomorrow. This is a really, really tough assignment for England. If they don't win, let's not be too hard on them.
I'm not going there. Take those words right back.
Exactly.
No, they are going to win. I think they've got confidence on their side. You saw a little bit of cheeky manoeuvres as well, some cheeky passes, some cheeky goals. And what I'm loving in all the papers, you're getting to know who they all are.
That's so important.
You've got their names. You know, most people don't know all the names of a football team and who's sort of doing well. So I'm loving this, whether it's in the Express, the Sun, the Mail. We're all talking about the ladies'
That's
football
how you promote.
club.
That's how you promote a sport. You have to make celebrities out of the individuals involved. Yeah, they can do as well as they want as a team, but if people don't know and cannot identify with the individuals involved, it's very difficult for young people to particularly
But
to grasp
that little
the
back
nettle.
heel by Rousseau was fantastic.
It was crap goalkeeping, though.
Yeah. It was that as well. It was that as well.
Talking about turning people into celebrities, Love Island, Hayley, is...
Wow, it's coming to a close on Monday.
I mean, we're all devastated.
I mean, what are we going to do, Phil?
I don't know.
I don't know, but yeah, it's coming to an end on Monday, and I did read there's been 5,000 Ofcom complaints, mainly
from Philip.
Is this about how terrible the programme is, or is it about actually something substantive?
Well, actually, I think there has been bad behaviour from some of the men in there this year. It's been flagged up. There's been a bit of controlling behaviour that hasn't been cool, and also a bit of bullying.
Oh, right.
So it hasn't been great this year, I think, on that aspect. I know when it first came out, we talked about the mental health aspect of it, and I still think that's something that needs to be addressed because, it's been a tough series.
Now, I saw that most of the complaints related to a challenge called Snog, Marry, Pie.
Just average.
As you
What's the pie?
Oh, you know about the snog and the married?
I fathom what they were.
Apparently the pie bit is you throw a custard pie at somebody. It's who you choose to throw a custard pie
I mean, well, actually, what happened is they all went for the same girl. So she had the pie thrown in her face 3 times, a girl called Tasha. So to watch, it was... I felt uncomfortable watching it because I felt like they were targeting her. And, I mean, how humiliating is that on TV to have that?
How are you feeling about going into it next year, Phil?
Well, after Lucy, after that...
pies were sort of steaking.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm liking Adele now rebooking this big event that she cancelled. Where was it? Las Vegas, her big event?
Caesar's Palace, baby. So, yeah, she's going to be there in November.
But is she?
Well...
Yeah, they all thought that last time, and she wasn't.
This is true. I'm gullible. I believed it. But the thing is, I don't understand why it's taken till November to happen. Like, I don't know why she couldn't have just done a stripped-back concert. Most people are going just for Adele's incredible voice. So why have we had to wait this long? It's not fair on the fans, I don't think.
I think I can wait a bit longer.
And with music, Elton John's doing a duet.
Yes, he's doing a duet with Britney Spears. They're re-releasing Tiny Dancer. Apparently it was Elton's idea, and they've been secretly recording in the studio.
Better than Kiki D's, better than the one with George Michael?
Well, it's meant to be the hit of the summer, so let's see. But, I mean, you can't go wrong with Kiki D, can you? And Elton, what a classic.
I'm a big fan of that. And in sport, the other thing, the football season for the men is getting going today.
Yes,
the EFL and the Charity
we saw
Shield.
Burnley fast out the blocks last night, winning at playoff finalists Huddersfield by a goal to 0. Queen's Park Rangers in action today up at Blackburn. Couldn't get there, unfortunately, because I'm on here with you. But, the EFL is a wonderful competition. We're seeing the Championship now. It's been referred to as Premier League 2. It's getting so strong. It's immeasurably better than it was 12 years ago, 13 years ago even. And, underway today. Millwall at home to Stoke. A few other games to pick out as well. But, as I say, that's the precursor. We've got the Community Shield tomorrow as well. Manchester City and Liverpool, two best sides in the
Thought you
the
were
country.
trying to forget that.
No, certainly not. And then into next week, we've got the big one, the start of the Premier League. So we'll talk about that then.
But I also want to talk a little bit more about the Commonwealth Games. I mean, to be fair, we haven't really heard enough about them, have we?
No,
it's
I'll
sort
tell
of
you why
been
that
really,
is.
really quiet, and boom, they're here.
The scheduling is awful. Scheduling's awful. Seb Coe said 2 years ago, this is going to be a veritable feast of athletics. You're going to have the World Athletics Championships backed on by the Commonwealth Games and then the Euros. I mean, like, anyone knows that with elite sport, if you have 3 tournaments backing onto each other, you're going to get injuries. They're only human beings. They're finely tuned internationals. Lo and behold, Dina Asher-Smith got injured this week because she pulled up in Oregon last week. She was expected to compete in Birmingham 3 days later. Not possible. And then we've lost a top athlete because of that. So the scheduling is to blame for it not getting the prominence that it's...
And the big news of the week is that yesterday it was Hayley's birthday.
Yeah.
Was it not?
I have, and do you know what?
Oh, wow.
Look at this. We've got a little present for you. We'll give it you later.
Hayley.
It's in there. But because we didn't want, do that there. I'll give it to you a bit later. But we didn't want you to feel left out, so we got a gag mag.
Hey.
So you will have the next couple of weeks of Funnier Than Ever, issue 17, volume 8 of
Thank you
gag
so
mag.
much.
So
I'm in a bad mood, actually. My mate opened an origami business, but he's folded already.
Yeah, that is exactly why you need that. That's exactly why you need that.
Have you got a little bit of news about John Cleese?
Oh, yes, I have. He's getting divorced.
That's a proper comedian. That's a proper comedian.
He has opened up and said that he's pretty careless with his money. He's recently just gone through a 12 million divorce settlement. And he's opened up and talked about money, which a lot of people don't do. I love that Aidan's reading his joke book already.
Well, all I can say is he had that money to spend there. But thank you both. Hayley, thank you. Aidan,
Cheers,
thank you. We'll be back at the same time, 10 o'clock next week. Don't go anywhere, because although Alistair Stewart isn't here, Angela Rippon and friends are. So stay tuned.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your Saturday morning forecast. It's a warm and a humid one as we start the weekend. Dry across the south at the moment, but elsewhere we've got rain spreading in. And that's all down to this weather front that's been pushing its way in through the course of last night. And with that, we'll see some slightly stronger winds, but the main emphasis is going to be on some pretty heavy rain. So already across much of Scotland, the north of England and Northern Ireland, we've got that rain falling, and it's going to be a wet morning here with some further heavy bursts of rain through the day. It will begin to peter out through the day, but we will also see some rain pushing into Wales, affecting perhaps the Peak District as well. But elsewhere further south, it stays dry with some spells of sunshine around, albeit a little bit cloudier than what we saw through Friday. Warm in the south, temperatures in the mid-20s to locally high 20s in places. Still warm and humid elsewhere. Some brighter skies following on later on across Scotland and Northern Ireland. And that's where it's going to turn quite clear and chilly as we go into the overnight period. Elsewhere, though, we keep a lot of cloud. We keep this rain, and further wet weather pushes back into Wales through the small hours of Sunday. So here, turning into quite a wet night. Temperatures 18 or so in the south, very warm indeed. Further north, as I say, getting down into single figures in some of our more rural spots. So a bit of a north-south split through Sunday morning. Lots of bright and fine weather across the northern half of the country, but further south we've got the cloud and we've got these outbreaks of rain. Some of the rain welcome, though, across the southeast, where it's been a very dry July so far. And I think as we go through the rest of the day, we'll continue to see some bits and pieces of rain through much of the afternoon. Despite that, though, still very warm and humid. Temperatures